Deep in the remote valleys of southeastern Kentucky, where Devil's Creek snakes through limestone cliffs and thick forests, local records from the 1880s show unsettling gaps that historians have never fully explained. Between 1881 and 1889, over 47 travelers vanished along the mountain trail linking Pineville to the coal camps farther east. Even more disturbing during this time, one family, the Harlans of Devil's Creek, somehow became the largest meat supplier in 3 counties, despite owning just a small farm with fewer than 20 cattle. For over a century, county officials and their descendants refused to discuss what really happened in those mountains. But recently uncovered letters and testimonies reveal a truth so horrific it explains why an entire community chose to bury it forever. Before we dive deeper into the Harlan family's blood-soaked legacy, I'd ask you to hit that subscribe button and notification bell, as stories like this come from deep dives into historical archives most people never see. Also, drop a comment with your state or city. I love hearing where my audience uncovers these forgotten American mysteries. The Devil's Creek settlement was never meant to last. Most travelers passing through that narrow valley were just following the old Cherokee Trail, used for centuries to travel between the Kentucky River Basin and the coal-rich mountains to the east. In 1879, southeastern Kentucky was tasting its first wave of industrial growth. Coal had been found in huge quantities across the Cumberland Mountains, turning isolated farming communities into hubs of an economic boom. New railroads were in the works, mining camps sprang up overnight, and a steady stream of workers, investors, and merchants braved the rugged mountain roads between established towns and remote mining operations. Devil's Creek sat perfectly along one of the busiest routes. The settlement was small, just 8 families spread across a valley floor barely 2 miles long and half a mile wide at its broadest. Steep limestone cliffs flanked both sides, creating a natural choke point that funneled all trail traffic through a single narrow pass. The creek itself, fed by underground springs, stayed clear and cold even in the hottest Kentucky summers, making it a natural stop for travelers and their animals. At the heart of this tiny community stood the Harlan family homestead, a weathered log cabin built in the 1840s by Patriarch Josiah Harlan, a Kentucky native who moved his family deeper into the mountains after losing his original farm to creditors after bad harvests. Josiah died in 1878, leaving the property to his 3 sons, Ezekiel, the eldest, at 34, Caleb, 29, and Samuel, the youngest, at 26. The Harlan brothers were known across the region as skilled butchers and meat processors, a trade learned from their father, who supplemented his income by processing livestock for other families. Their reputation rested on efficiency and quality. They could break down a full-grown steer faster than any butchers in 3 counties, and their cured meats and sausages were prized by merchants traveling the mountain trails. What set the Harlans apart was their grasp of the new economic reality. While other mountain families struggled to adapt, the Harlans saw the growing traffic along the Devil's Creek Trail as a gold mine. Miners, investors, and merchants heading to and from the coal camps were willing to pay top dollar for quality meat, especially preserved goods that could withstand long, rough journeys. By 1880, the Harlans had built an advanced smokehouse and meat processing facility behind their cabin, complete with multiple curing chambers and a cold storage area dug deep into the hillside. Their setup was so impressive that merchants from as far as Lexington placed regular orders for their famous mountain sausage and dried beef, which had a unique flavor customers couldn't find elsewhere. Ezekiel, the eldest, handled business operations and customer relations. A tall, lean man with sharp gray eyes and a well-groomed beard, he carried an air of respectability when dealing with merchants and mining company reps. Caleb oversaw the meat processing and preservation. using techniques he claimed to have learned from German immigrants who briefly settled in the area before moving to the coal camps. Samuel, the youngest, was the most skilled with a knife, able to butcher and prepare an animal with surgical precision. The brothers never married, unusual for men their age in that era, but they explained it by saying their business consumed all their time. They lived together in the family homestead, rising before dawn each day to tend their livestock and processing operations. Their nearest neighbors, the Whitfields, lived half a mile down the creek. Thomas Whitfield and his wife Martha had 4 kids and ran a small general store serving the valley's families and passing travelers. Thomas often remarked to Martha that he couldn't figure out how the Harlans processed so much meat with such a small herd, but he chalked it up to their business connections and assumed they bought livestock from farms outside the valley. The other families in Devil's Creek, the Rowlands, Napiers, Combs, and others, were mostly subsistence farmers who earned extra income by offering travelers fresh water, horse feed, repairs, or occasional lodging. They respected the Harlans for the prosperity their meat business brought to the valley, but sometimes wondered why the brothers were so secretive about their suppliers. By spring 1881, the Harland operation was thriving, processing meat almost non-stop. The sound of axes and cleavers echoed from their facility at all hours, and smoke from their curing chambers hung over the valley. Thomas Whitfield noted in his journal that the Harlans seemed busier than ever, yet their livestock herds didn't grow to match their output. The first sign of trouble came on a humid evening in late June 1881, when a Louisville merchant named Benjamin Crawford failed to reach the Combs family cabin where he'd planned to stay. Crawford, a regular on the Devil's Creek route, was known for his punctuality, transporting goods to the mining camps and returning with coal samples and equipment orders. That morning, he'd stopped at the Whitfield store, bought supplies, and mentioned he'd visit the Harlan facility to place a large meat order before heading to the Combs cabin. When he didn't arrive by nightfall, Daniel Combs assumed he'd pushed on to the next settlement. But the next morning, Crawford's horse was found wandering near the limestone cliffs on the valley's eastern edge, still saddled, carrying his sample cases, but with no sign of the man himself. A search party of adult men from the Devil's Creek families spent 3 days scouring the valley and surrounding hills, checking game trails, caves, and crevices. They found Crawford's hat caught on a branch a quarter-mile upstream from the Harlan property, but no other trace, no clothing, no personal items, no body. The limestone terrain made tracking tough, but experienced hunters found no signs of an animal attack, blood, or disturbed vegetation suggesting a struggle. Crawford's horse showed no panic or injury, and its saddlebags held his inventory and several $100s in payment, money no ordinary thief would leave behind. Ezekiel Harland was especially helpful during the search, offering his brother's knowledge of the terrain and searching caves and abandoned mine shafts. When no trace of Crawford was found, Ezekiel suggested he'd likely been attacked by a drifter, killed, and dumped in one of the region's deep limestone sinkholes. The explanation seemed plausible, though some noted the untouched money. Thomas Whitfield wrote in his journal that the incident left him uneasy, especially since the Harlans seemed less concerned than others, almost as if they'd expected it. 3 weeks later, a second traveler, James Tolliver, a Virginia mining engineer surveying railroad routes, vanished. Tolliver was with a local guide, but split off to take measurements along Devil's Creek, while the guide secured lodging ahead. His surveying equipment was found abandoned 200 yards downstream from the Harlan property, and his horse was spotted the next morning grazing peacefully, its reins dragging and saddlebags intact. Like Crawford, Tolliver disappeared without signs of violence or struggle. This second vanishing sparked real fear in Devil's Creek. 2 experienced travelers, both familiar with mountain dangers, had disappeared within a month along the same trail. Several families considered abandoning their homes for safer areas. Martha Whitfield voiced what others were thinking privately. Both disappearances happened near the Harland property, and both men carried significant money. She also noted the Harlands' meat processing had ramped up, with smoke from their curing chambers constant and work sounds echoing late into the night. Thomas initially dismissed her concerns as fear-driven, but he started watching the Harlands more closely. What he saw over the next weeks would haunt him forever and uncover one of the most brutal family operations in American frontier history. Thomas, though not formally educated, had 43 years of mountain living that honed his practical intelligence. He understood animal behavior, weather patterns, and the subtle signs of something wrong in his community. He noticed a chilling pattern. Every few weeks, a traveler, often a wealthy merchant, investor, or engineer, would visit the Harland facility for business and then vanish along the trail. Thomas began keeping detailed journal notes, tracking when travelers stopped in the valley. By fall 1881, he documented 7 disappearances tied to Harland business dealings, with valuable goods and money left behind, ruling out robbery. The Harlands were always helpful in searches, suggesting natural hazards like sinkholes, but their livestock herds stayed small despite their booming output. When Thomas asked Ezekiel about this, he claimed they bought cattle from outside dealers for immediate processing, bypassing local markets. But Thomas never saw or heard cattle deliveries, which would have been noisy and noticeable. The Harlands grew secretive, discouraging visits, and working mostly at night, citing better conditions for meat processing. They gained weight despite their demanding work, and Ezekiel sported expensive items: a gold pocket watch, high-quality boots, a costly rifle, beyond a butcher's budget. While the community worried about the missing, the Harlands seemed indifferent, joining searches only when asked and dismissing further efforts as pointless. During the winter of 1881-1882, travel slowed and disappearances paused, giving Thomas time to plan. He was convinced the Harlands were involved, but lacked proof and feared for his family's safety. His store was a hub for traveler gossip, and he suspected the Harlands gathered intelligence there, possibly eavesdropping or questioning neighbors. This made his family potential witnesses to a secret the Harlands would kill to protect. In spring 1882, as travel resumed, Thomas began surveilling the Harland property, using limestone outcroppings and a Civil War-era spyglass to watch from half a mile away. He saw Ezekiel monitoring the trail, engaging wealthy travelers, and inviting them to the facility, while Caleb and Samuel prepped equipment with unusual precision. On a foggy April morning, Thomas followed Marcus Donovan, a prosperous merchant carrying over $1,000 from the Whitfield store to the Harlands. Ezekiel led Donovan to a secondary building, not the main facility, where Thomas saw a chilling setup: heavy tables, ceiling hooks, and liquid containers designed for large-scale processing. Ezekiel's demeanor turned predatory, and Caleb and Samuel joined, attacking Donovan with practiced efficiency. They killed him, butchered his body like livestock, preserved certain cuts, ground others, and dissolved bones in caustic solution, disposing of traceable items. The process took under 3 hours, leaving no evidence. Thomas, sickened but resolute, knew he held dangerous knowledge. The Harlands' efficiency suggested dozens of murders, and he feared for his family. In early May, 3 more travelers vanished after visiting the Harlands. On May 15, U.S. Marshal William Patterson arrived to investigate the missing persons reports. When Ezekiel invited him to the facility, Thomas, fearing another murder, met Patterson privately on May 16, sharing his journal and describing the killing facility. Patterson, initially skeptical, was swayed by Thomas's detailed evidence. They planned for Patterson to visit the Harlands while Thomas watched, ready to alert authorities if needed. On May 17, wealthy investor Charles Pemberton arrived, a prime target. On May 18, Patterson visited the Harlans, armed and cautious, declining to enter the secondary building. When Ezekiel pushed and Patterson pressed about their suppliers, Caleb signaled for attack. Patterson shot Ezekiel and Samuel dead, then cornered Caleb in the killing facility, where human remains and records confirmed Thomas's account. Caleb confessed to over 50 murders since 1881, targeting wealthy travelers, processing their bodies into products sold across the region, and using chemicals to destroy evidence. The news spread, shocking Kentucky and beyond, becoming one of the 19th century's most horrific serial killing cases. Caleb's trial revealed their sophisticated methods, with his journal documenting victim selection and meat quality. His products had reached hotels, restaurants, and mining camps, sparking a public health crisis. Thomas's testimony was key, but his family faced backlash and relocated. Caleb died in jail before his hanging, leaving some victims unidentified. The case reshaped Devil's Creek, with families leaving and the Harlan property destroyed. It spurred demands for better law enforcement and communication in remote areas, set legal precedents for prosecuting such crimes, and damaged the region's meat industry. The Harlan site became a shunned landmark, and the case remains a study in organized serial killing, showing how evil can hide in plain sight. What do you think? Was everything uncovered, or were there accomplices who escaped? Share your theories below, and if you want more mysteries, subscribe, hit the bell, and share. The Appalachians hold more secrets, and we'll explore them together.